This is Court Watch with Alex Swoyer, and I'm excited to bring you the 11th episode of my podcast, where I will be joined by former President Trump's attorney, Alina Habba, along with my coworker, Washington Times White House correspondent, Jeff Mordock. We'll chat during the episode with Mr. Trump's counsel about the federal indictment over his handling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. We'll dive into legal strategy and explore what his legal team may plan to do in the coming months, as this case against him is pending and his campaign for 2024 is heating up. Here's our interview with Alina Habba, who details what the former president is facing.
Hi, guys. How are you?
We just have a handful of questions, so thank you so much. Our first question is what we can expect with the legal strategy going forward. I saw in the indictment, I went to law school. I haven't practiced. I do journalism more than I do law, but I kept thinking about the attorney-client privilege when I was reading through the indictment and with the references to the president's communications. I was wondering, could that get tossed? Are you all considering having Judge Cannon review the D.C. District Judge's decision there?
Obviously, I will say that piercing attorney-client privilege is a very dangerous predicament to be in and a very dangerous precedent to have, where you're cutting into something that most people want and need, which is to trust their attorneys and trust that those conversations can be open and honest. I will say there's nothing I'm concerned about. However, I don't think that decision was right. So I would expect that they would challenge it.
Okay, yeah. I've talked to some legal experts and they've talked about like how a decision like that could deter clients from talking and openly and honestly with their lawyers.
Exactly.
Right.
How would you feel if you had a lawyer and you were concerned that everything you said eventually would go into court?
Right.
I guess, how can you get proper legal advice? How can you get proper counsel? It doesn't really work. It goes against the entire premise of attorney-client privilege.
And there's been talk about how this is a political prosecution. There's been people have pointed out how President Joe Biden has had documents in his possession,
Right.
Vice President Mike Pence, Hillary Clinton, so on. How does that, I know you don't want to talk about legal strategy or get too much involved in this case, but like how can is that something a jury can consider?
I think that the benefit that we have is cases like the Clinton sock thrower case, where you see the way the judge ruled there, right? Mm-hmm. And that's case law. That's precedent. That's legal precedent. That will, of course, be used in front of the judge.
Given some of the legal situations the former president finds himself in, do you see him ever taking the stand in any of these cases? Is that something?
Of course. Why not? He did nothing wrong.
And one of the things, too, is he's talked about how he's declassified documents. Is he the best one to talk about that, like what he's done, what he remembers as history?
That's a legal strategy question. That team will decide that. So they have to decide what is best and is not best in a criminal law situation. In a civil case, I will tell you, on the cases, some of them I have, where he's the defendant, not where he's the plaintiff, I think that he's a fantastic advocate for himself, because nobody can say it better than himself what he did and didn't do, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that that's what's best in a criminal case with a DOJ led by Jack Smith. Every case for any lawyer is case by case. So we have to look at it. But am I ever concerned for Donald Trump per se? No.
Is there one of the cases that you think would be more appropriate for him to be on this, or one of the cases that more leans heavily towards him testifying than some of the other cases he's involved in right now?
I personally don't have a problem with him ever testifying. I don't know what in a criminal scenario they would want, but I can tell you on my civil cases, I like him testifying. Mm-hmm. I think that he's very educated, very well spoken, and he's done nothing wrong. So when you've done nothing wrong, you should speak to that when you can and when it's legally sound. But again, it's a strategy decision. It's a legal strategy decision for the attorneys of record to decide at that moment.
And like you talk about him being able to advocate for himself. What about the issue of gag orders? And obviously like the issue of political speech being first and forefront with the First Amendment, him running for president, 2024 campaign.
Right.
Is that something that you guys will take all the way to the Supreme Court? I saw just news out today about an order pertaining to like what he's allowed to say on social media or post, I guess.
It's evidentiary. So that order was evidentiary. Evidentiary gag orders, it's different than a gag order to have free speech. Gag orders for free speech from the leading GOP candidate are just unconstitutional. You can't have them. he has a right to free speech. He has a right to address the public when they have questions about who will be their next president, and I think he should be able to do so.
Do you have any updates, or can you talk to us about where things stand on the ongoing investigations by the Justice Department over January 6th, or even the Georgia prosecutors looking at charges from the 2020 election?
No, nothing that the public doesn't know. No.
Okay, yeah. And then I guess it sounds like we're just in, you mentioned uncharted legal waters with what's going on. It's unprecedented. I didn't know you mentioned certain cases. Is there anything even comparable? What does this mean for, I guess, our democracy and going forward with the courts and the right to a fair trial?
Well, I think that we're seeing a depletion of our democracy right in front of our eyes. We're seeing political warfare. We're seeing a lack of lawfare where you're allowed to just go in and use the laws and use case law and use case precedent to fight fair because they have no way to fight. And many people have spoken publicly about this. But when you're a candidate and when you're, for me, my client, and you it's hand in hand for him, right? So you have these people, these politicians that can't win. They can't win fair. They can't win without touching elections. They can't win without election interference. And the only way they can take Donald Trump out, because he is so strong, is by trying to put him in jail. That is the single most pathetic, desperate attempt to win. I said this the other day, but if you want to fight fair, put your boxing gloves on and get in the ring. But they don't have anybody. So this is what they're doing. It's pathetic.
One question I have on the documents case, and it doesn't pertain to legal strategy, but I'm somewhat surprised that the prosecutors steered clear of the Presidential Records Act in the indictment. They really don't get into that. Why do you look at them avoiding that issue?
Well, I think your question answers it all. They avoided the issue because they know that the Presidential Records Act allows the president to take the documents with him to declassify them, and he is summarily the only person that could do that. The Presidential Records Act destroys their case. So they're using the Espionage Act, something that is antiquated, that doesn't apply. The man did not sell information. He didn't give information out. He didn't do any of that. That is something that we're hearing that the Bidens were being bought and paid off to give access, not the Trumps, but the Presidential Record Act is not in the indictment because it would ruin their case.
Is there anything that, the media, I'm sure there's you could probably list a few things, but particularly in this interview that we haven't asked you or that you think has been left out of coverage that the public should know?
I always say that the public needs to understand that an indictment is one-sided, that an indictment is cherry picking of a grand jury and the information they want to put in front of a grand jury that we have no say in and that we had no representation in that grand jury. I think that's the most important thing, I would say.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and I'm glad we were able to catch you.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so. And also feel free to email me interesting questions or topics you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast, Court Watch, at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.